Hi, it's me, Ingrid INFP, and I wanted to do an update on my journey through psychiatry. Um, I have met patients with a lot of different problems that aren't the general, like the patients that I meet in general practice. Um, I had a patient who had depersonalization and derealization syndrome or disorder, so DDD. And apparently it's pretty common. It's 1 to 3% of the population, which is common for a disorder. That's the amount of people who have bipolar disorder. And well, the psychiatrist described it to me as having the sensation of deja vu, but like all the time, or a lot of times, and for a long time, not just like 1 second, or extremely often. So, and he was saying, yeah, well, often it comes from trauma or from PTSD or that kind of thing, but it can come without PTSD. It can come completely separate from any psychosis, but it is linked to psychosis because it's talking about like how your reality isn't other people's reality. But in itself, there is apparently a CBT therapy for this, and that actually they don't have any better tools in psychiatry than they do at the general practice. He said there is only one book. There is only one book that is about the subject in Swedish. And I found out that my library has it, so I'm going to go and get it. But it's out of the library at the moment, so I'm waiting. I've reserved a book, so I'm waiting until the person who has it now gives it back. Because that's a pretty interesting thing, you know. The psychiatrist was talking to me about a patient who had met who had 6 different separate personalities and would at random like go to become the different personality. Like she had a 6-year-old child and an 18-year-old temperamental girl and a 13-year-old shy boy, all inside of her. And so she would sometimes end up in crazy situations, and then she'd wake up as another personality, and then, or like as herself, and she'd be all like in a bad situation. Apparently she had mostly problems from the 18-year-old temperamental self who would, well, cry for attention and end up in pretty bad situations involving sex and drugs and basically bad situations. And then she'd wake up and then she'd be like, oh shit, what have I done? And she'd been through a lot of trauma. I think that this is more common than we think. I mean, I don't have this. I mean, I've had deja vu sometimes, but not that often. And I don't have like dissociation in this sense. But depersonalization is something that is deja vu, but like a lot of it. Derealization. Deja vu, or being, when you, the psychiatrist explained that when you have a panic attack, it kind of is like you are in a derealization state because nothing seems real, you're in a weird state. So there have definitely been times where I have felt like nothing is real, or that I'm not myself, or that I'm looking at myself from the outside, or that kind of thing. But it's not to the same degree as these people who have this disorder. And it led me to think of my, well, ex-INFP, INFJ friend, who said that he would get deja vu quite a lot. And I don't know if this is something that NI deals with, you know? Or if it's just an NF thing, or if it has nothing to do with personality type. But I do think that it has to do with NI. NI is kind of outside of reality. So wouldn't you get more derealization episodes if you have a dominant NI? I think that would be the case. Like, I see NI dominant user more likely to dissociate or have derealization than an SE dominant person, or an SI dominant person. I think that the lower down your SE and SI are, the less preference you have by definition of these things, and the more likely you'll slip into that kind of outer state. Just like just that intuition is different from sensing. Reality is different from derealization. So I don't know. Maybe there is a higher prevalence among intuitive people of this disorder. I don't know. This is just a conjecture that I'm making. I mean, I've been meeting people who have strange things, and it's like sometimes I can't put my finger on it. I'm just like, this person's not doing well. I don't know what problem they have, but something is not right. And I talk to them, and it's not like they're depressed. And that's where you start going into the brink of psychiatry that's like real, pure psychiatry, where it's not just, poor mental health. This is like actual conditions that are severely affecting the cognitive, psychological processes in the brain. So there are people with terrible PTSD, have been through terrible things. There are people who have terrible sense of self and of emotions and such. There are people who are not really there, and it's sad because a lot of them are very young, and because I only take adults at psychiatry, I actually found out I'll be at the child psychiatry for 1 week, which will be interesting because I've never actually been to child psychiatry. I've only been at adult psychiatry in my medical training. So in February, I'll be a week at the child psychiatry, which is tragic, but also really interesting. I want to help people, That's kind of why I became a doctor, and sometimes you're the only person that can help these people, and it really sucks. But because you can't do what you can't make sure that they have a good life. A lot of people have really, really tragic lives, and it's not medication or therapy that is going to help them. It's like having a stable home, having a stable family, having a job that works for them. there are people who live in terrible, terrible conditions, and like I can't help them. I can only do the medical thing, which is just like a little blip in an ocean of problems, you know? So that is pretty discouraging. But I can try to be at least like a friendly figure, you know? Another thing that I found out is that my ESFJ colleague's son, who actually helped me set up this couch that I'm sitting on right now. I met him at the general practice clinic, wrote a referral to the psychiatry department for ADHD, because his ADHD actually helped make the sofa. He has a lot of energy, you know, and was just up to anything spontaneous. So he was like, oh, of course I'll fix the sofa. So I met him as a patient, wrote a referral to the psychiatry, and then I found out today, well, on Monday I found out that, the psychiatry department had accepted my referral, which is great. You know, I never expect that, because usually they're like not accepting my referrals. So they accepted it. And then today I found out that they were like, oh, since you know the patient, can't you take his case? And I was like, yeah, I kind of need to take a case where I do the whole ADHD or autism like process. I can't take as many as I want because it involves 4 different meetings with this person. And I don't have that many book times. I'm only at psychiatry for 3 months. So the amount of patients that I'll be able to meet is limited. So it's going to be him, which I don't know. I don't know. So technically I will have met him 5 times as a doctor, but it would be a little bit weird also, because like suddenly I'll have to be like the psychiatrist for him, which I don't know. I don't know him that well, so like it's all fine. It's not like I meet him on a daily basis or that we're friends or that kind of thing. But it is a little bit weird, you know? But it's also because my town is so small. I mean, how many psychiatrists are there? Not that many. And how many have the time to meet a person 4 times? None of the specialists do. So they're like, oh, you're going to be at psychiatry. Come on and take this person that you wrote the referral about, you know? They're like, oh, well, it will save time. It will save us a visit because you've already done the visit and you've already written a referral. So, yeah. I also have other patients that I've sent a referral and I will be meeting them, which in a way is good and in a way is bad, and I don't know what that means. And the patients are obviously really confused because they're like, wait, it says here on the paper that I'm going to be meeting Ingrid, but she works at the general practice. Is she suddenly a psychiatrist, you know? And they get all confused. I have a patient who is going to meet me like at the end of February or something. And she talked to the nurse at my healthcare clinic, and she was all confused. And the nurse came to me like all confused. And I was like, yeah, well, that's the truth of it. The truth is that I've met her as a general practice doctor and as the psychiatrist. So, yeah, it's kind of dumb because, like, I send these referrals away so that somebody else can take care of these people. And now, like, I end up with these people again back to me. Like, I'm responding to my own referral. Like, I send a letter to myself and I'm like, that's great. I'm not like smarter now that I am at psychiatry. The only thing that is positive about this is that I have a great psychiatrist who's supervising me. I can call him at any time in the morning, and I can call him at any time when I have met the patients. So technically, I talk about the patients twice with him because in the morning we go through all the patients for the day, and it takes just like I looked up because I had a phone call this morning, and he was like, "Oh, how is it with the patients?" And I had 3 patients, and one of them didn't even come. Well, 4 patients because one of them was a telephone time, and the telephone time she didn't even answer the phone. So really common in psychiatry that people don't come. I had a great lunch because every Thursday in Sweden they eat pancakes. It's like an old military tradition, I think. My grandfather, when he was in the Swedish military, Sweden hasn't been in World War II, so they were neutral during the war. Well, neutral, selling arms to the Nazis, but or steel mostly, but they weren't involved in combat. So my grandfather was not involved in combat, but he had to. He hadn't really lived in Sweden, my grandfather, so he was Swedish citizen, but he'd lived in Spain his whole life. So he came to Sweden, had to learn the language, and that's how he met my grandma, because my grandma taught him Swedish, or like better Swedish than what he knew from like being a little kid in Sweden. So he learned that every Thursday they would have pea soup and pancakes, and that's what they keep serving. And they serve it at like all cafeterias in Sweden and a few restaurants. They serve pancakes and pea soup, and it's like I don't know how these things go together, but in the mind of a Swedish person, these things are like always associated. So I went and ate that because I had so much time today. I didn't know what to do. I finished the book. But yeah, I was pretty disconcerted. But it is wonderful that I have a supervisor who, like, it took us 6 minutes on the phone to go through all the patients. And then we talked, and he told me about the derealization person again, and he was telling me about how in like Eastern Europe there are people who, like, there's big organization that is like smuggling people, trafficking people, and like indoctrinating, like brainwashing them into having a separate personality. And I was like, wow, this is so interesting. Unfortunately, we were interrupted, but yeah, he seems like a great guy to talk to. So and he kind of jokes that he's trying to like indoctrinate me to like understand what psychiatry can do and what my healthcare clinic can do, so that I know how to do things on my own without needing his help, and so that I can teach all of the people at my healthcare clinic what I've learned. So it's great. But sometimes he's like, yeah, like complaining about the GP doctors, And I'm like, yeah, you know that I'm a GP doctor, so you're talking about my colleagues. And he's like, yeah, I know. And we laugh. And so it's great. Um, it's great that I can, like, I don't feel like I'm all alone with these really, really sick patients, you know? And um, that, like, it's interesting. It's really interesting. Um, but so, yeah, he talked about derealization and autism, and there's certain things that kind of go together. Um, I met a girl with probable psychosis, but I don't know. She's just like losing her cognitive abilities, and I don't really, her mom was there, but it was like her mom, I think, didn't want to see how bad things really were. And and it was sad. It was pretty sad because it reminded me of a psychosis patient I had when I was an intern in psychiatry in the south of Sweden. And this person, I'll never forget her. And there was something similar with these two girls the one that I met now and the one I met then. Schizophrenia really is one of the worst things that can happen to a person. It's really, really tragic. And this girl, I followed her process during the whole summer that I was there at psychiatry. And because I met her at the emergency room, and then I met her several times while she was hospitalized. And this person had been a medical student in Riga. And then suddenly the parents find out that she hasn't been paying the bills. She has been sent out from the school, and like their daughter, the daughter went missing. Like they tried to get contact with her. She went to London just on a whim and didn't like tell anyone. And then because she didn't have anywhere to live anymore, she had to come back home to Sweden where her parents were, and her parents found out that like she wasn't as like the girl that she used to be 6 months before. She started being really childish. She wanted to watch children's movies over and over again. She needed reminders to like go to the bathroom or to eat lunch with everybody else. She would sit by a wall near their like in their garden and just like pass her hands on the wall like back and forth. And she scraped her finger, and so by doing that on the wall several times. And so when she came to me at the emergency room, she was convinced that the reason that she was there was because she had hurt her finger. And I was like, we are at psychiatry right now. Your finger has been patched up. You're not here for your finger. And she was like, okay. But she was not taking in anything at all. And I was like, I think that we need to like check this out. So I hospitalized her, but then later on we found out that she wanted to run away from the hospital because she didn't understand why she was there and stuff, even though we kept explaining to her. She did not understand. And they brought us all of the notebooks that she had written. And because, well, she was in medical school, so she'd brought with her like her medical books and stuff, but she wasn't reading them. She was just flipping through them. And what she had been writing was just like quotes that had nothing to do with anything. And there were like doodles that were like the same doodle over and over again on several pages. And it was like, what is this, you know? And she would say yes and no. And she would be like really, you would think that she was really into, but she had no idea what the conversations were about. She was trying so hard to keep up some kind of front, but it was like, you know, and we couldn't figure out if there were voices or that kind of thing, because she couldn't talk at a certain point. And then she got put into a home, but it was sad because she came from a family that was like really high prestige, like her brother had gotten into some American university and gotten a scholarship, and they were really like highly functioning people, and she was once that too. I know that the psychiatrist like stalked her Facebook page, like looked at to see when she started becoming strange, and yeah, she never got better. And she must have been 19, 20. And I saw a girl today who was looking pretty scarily like her. Not in like appearance or such, but in the way she was staring out, apathetic, like nothing in the real world actually matters. It takes my breath away, you know? It's like, oh, you know? There are different kinds of psychosis, and some of them are really, you know, overt, like you know, that they'll say really crazy stuff and they'll do really crazy things, like burn something down or stuff like that. But then there are the people who have schizophrenia that is like just a drawing back of the self, and that's it's sad that it affects people who are otherwise, you know, really functional before, and then suddenly from like in the space of a few months they become a totally non-existent person, you know? It's like their whole soul has been sucked out of them. And I never knew these girls before they became the way that they became, but hearing the stories from the families, it's really terrible. So yeah, this is the kind of stuff that I'm like digging into. So it is good that I have a lot of time to just veg out on the sofas in the psychiatry department. Basically, I'm just reading books and like taking my mind off things, because it is really sad. There are people who are getting better, and that's great. But you know, there are people with really tragic lives. I had the girl who was anorexic and she has osteoporosis. I mean, her bones are so brittle because she doesn't eat anything. And that's pretty sad to have that when you're about 20. And there are people who who have been through terrible, terrible traumas and all sorts of abuse. And the only way that they can cope is by being outside of themselves, by dissociating. I think that children are really resilient in that they can have like imaginary friends, you know, like you can see where this sense of dissociation can be really easy to fall into as a child. But yeah, seeing that in adult people is also, it hurts, you know, because, you know, I hope that they get better, but a lot of them don't. And they'll find other ways to live. You know, some people become criminals, and some people start abusing different substances, and some people start abusing other people. And yeah, this person I talked to today, she didn't really know why she had, the one who resembled the other girl with schizophrenia. She had no idea why she had been at the hospital, and so she wanted to sue a lot of people that were working at the psychiatry, but she didn't know how to do it because she doesn't have the cognitive abilities to sue someone. And I told her, like, you can just call this number and they will help you. And it was like, that was too much for her. And I know that I get social anxiety from calling telephone numbers. But it was like, for her, the actual process of finding a telephone number and dialing it and calling a person was just too much for her. And it's sad, you know, because you think like, wow, these people, they can't have free agency. Maybe they shouldn't have free agency, but that's another question. But it's like, it must be really scary to like, suddenly you're in a hospital and you don't understand what people are saying or like what's going on. But it's like, you need to be there because otherwise she'd have hurt herself or some whatever at home. And yeah, it's hard. It's hard. So I'm doing my best to like think about other things. You know, I go outside at lunchtime and look at the snow and the sun and snow, and I read a book and I watch YouTube videos. I try to stay away from like the psychologists and psychiatrists because, you know, I just need a break. And I am starting this book, The Waves by Virginia Woolf, because it has been recommended several times by you, the audience. So I will be reading that. I finished the book, Le Grand Meaulnes by Alain-Fournier, which I've been wanting to read for a while. It's kind of fantastical. It's about old France, you know, like from the 1890s in like rural France, and then suddenly something like kind of extraordinary fairy tale like happens, and like the whole thing about these people is that they want to retrieve that one moment of like fairy tale novelty, which they don't have in rural, like 1890s rural France. So it was interesting to read that book because, you know, we're used to things to either be really like fantastical or like pretty boring, like realistic. But here it was like, okay, they live in a really realistic world, and like the slightest out of the ordinary is really treasured. So I really like that book. That made me think a little bit about like, you know, the mystical, the derealization. I'm going to try to get that book from the library about derealization. Read a little bit about it so that I know how to take care of patients with that. I have met several patients during time who have had dissociative symptoms, but I'm not a psychologist. Psychologists are really more into like the treatment and actually going deep into the psyche. I can't do much as a doctor. I can just like basically like push the buttons so that things happen. But I'm not the person who is like actually diving deep into the psychology of people. So yeah, that was a little update about my time at Psychiatry. It is nice to get a lot of young people, though, because I often meet a lot of old people, which is good, but you know, where it's kind of less relatable, you know. I think that the young people at Psychiatry kind of relate to me, and you know, like I can talk to them like we're peers, you know, kind of in a way. I also know what they are going through, you know, being in the same generation and all. So I think that there is something like that is easier for me there. One thing that does kind of make me a bit sad is that it seems like it's mostly white people who are getting help and not people of other ethnicities, because well, you have to know quite good Swedish in order to like get your point across, you know? And if you can't get your point across, how are you going to get to psychiatry? It's only if you are like really, really, really terribly sick and you end up at the psychiatric emergencies that you might get some help. And in a lot of cultures, suicide is not well seen. So they don't attempt it, but they still feel terrible. I mean, you know, belief in God is not going to, like, it might help you in a way, but if you are a really psychiatric patient, then, you know, it's it doesn't make you feel like suddenly healthy, you know. But I do agree that it can help. The faith can help. That it can lift a lot of burdens off people's shoulders. And that it can help people like strive to be good. But there is a certain sense of religion that rubs me the wrong way in psychiatry, because it can excuse a lot of stuff. A lot of psychotic symptoms are included in religion. But that's a topic for another day. Okay, now I've been almost talking for 40 minutes. Have a great day, everybody.